It was a muggy Tuesday morning in August, hot and sticky, the kind of day that clings to your skin when Richard Nelson, the newly appointed police chief, stepped out of his beat-up old sedan in the heart of Blue Ridge, a sleepy little city nestled in the rolling hills of North Carolina. Can you imagine the scene? Dressed in a faded plaid shirt, worn-out jeans, and scuffed sneakers that had seen better days, he didn't look anything like a man who'd spent 2 decades clawing his way up the ranks of law enforcement. And that, my friends, was exactly the point. Richard wasn't here for the pomp and circumstance. No way. He believed in seeing the raw, unvarnished truth, not some shiny, rehearsed version served up in boardrooms or staged welcomes. As a black man stepping into a leadership role in a precinct shadowed by rumors of misconduct, he was determined to peel back the layers and see the department for what it really was. How else could he do that but by slipping in undercover, blending into the background like a ghost? The precinct's parking lot was alive, buzzing like a beehive with officers coming and going, their voices bouncing off the asphalt. Richard stood there for a moment, scanning the chaos. Did they even notice him? He caught the casual banter, the quick glances tossed his way, but no one seemed to clock him as anything special. And why would they? His appointment had only been announced a few days ago, a quiet little memo buried in their inboxes, and he'd made damn sure not to trumpet his arrival until the official inspection later that morning. Perfect! He tugged the brim of his weathered baseball cap lower over his eyes and sucked in a deep breath, the humid air thick in his lungs. The weight of his mission to dig out the rot festering in this department pressed down on him like a ton of bricks. He'd faced pushback before, sure, but this felt different. Could he really handle what was coming? As he ambled toward the building, the faint ripple of laughter floated through the sticky air, carefree, mocking, sharp. Richard slipped through the precinct's side entrance, unnoticed amid the hum of chatter and the incessant ringing of phones. Inside, the tiled floors gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, blindingly bright, while the stale smell of burnt coffee assaulted his nose. He moved slowly, deliberately, drinking it all in. What was this place really like? Officers clustered around desks, some swapping loud stories, others hunched over paperwork with bored expressions. No one gave him a second look perfect, just perfect until he lingered a little too long near the break room. "Hey, you!" a voice snapped, cutting through the noise like a whip. Richard turned, and there he was, a white officer striding toward him, a smug grin stretched across his face like he owned the place. His badge glinted, Officer Daniels. Behind him, a handful of buddies lounged against the wall, smirking, their eyes glinting with curiosity. Richard opened his mouth, should he say something, but Daniels didn't even pause. "Lost, are we?" "This isn't a shelter," the officer sneered, his tone dripping with condescension. "You need to take that mess somewhere else." The words hit Richard like a sucker punch, sharp and stinging. What now? Reveal himself? Call this clown out? Or let it play out? He froze, caught in the headlights of his own indecision. But Daniels wasn't done, not by a long shot. He stepped closer, puffing up his chest, his voice booming for the peanut gallery. "Didn't you hear me? Get out of here. We don't need people like you hanging around." Laughter exploded from the onlookers, cruel, guttural, unrestrained, and Richard's jaw tightened, his heart hammering in his chest. He tried to speak, "Come on, say something." But Daniels leaned in, his face so close Richard could smell the cheap aftershave. Then, out of nowhere, bam, the officer spat right in his face. Time screeched to a halt. Richard's breath caught, the warm saliva sliding down his cheek like a slow-motion nightmare. Around him, the laughter roared louder, unbelievable. One officer slapped the table, practically howling, while another muttered something nasty about showing the riffraff their place. Richard's mind spun like a top. What the hell just happened? His pulse pounded in his ears, deafening, but he refused to crack. No way was he giving them the satisfaction. He reached into his pocket, fingers trembling just a bit, and pulled out a crumpled handkerchief. Slowly, oh so slowly, he wiped his face. Every move deliberate, every second stretching out like eternity. "Is this how you treat everyone who walks through these doors?" he asked, his voice steady as steel, cutting through the chaos. Daniel smirked, unfazed. "Only the ones who don't belong here." Another burst of laughter. God, these guys were relentless. But Richard stayed silent. He turned on his heel, heart still racing, and marched down the hallway toward the main office, leaving their cackling behind. Then crackle. The intercom blared to life, summoning everyone to the briefing room. Showtime. The room was a circus when he got there, officers filing in with coffee mugs sloshing and inside jokes flying. Richard slipped in through a side door, clutching a folder stamped with the precinct seal, his ace in the hole. He hung back, out of sight, watching those familiar faces, some still snickering from their little break room stunt. Up front, Captain Harris, a stocky guy with a graying mustache, banged a fist for order. "All right, settle down, everyone. We've got an important introduction today." Oh, they had no idea what was coming. The chatter died down, curiosity sparking in their eyes. Daniel slouched against the wall, arms crossed, that smug grin still glued to his face. Did this guy ever stop? "Captain." Harris cleared his throat, puffing out his chest. "As most of you know, Chief Caldwell retired last month. We've been waiting for his replacement, and I'm thrilled to introduce our new leader, a man with an incredible record and a real vision for this department. Here it comes." Richard stepped forward, each footfall echoing like a drumbeat. The room froze dead silent as he strode to the podium, his presence screaming authority. He slapped the folder down on the lectern and scanned the crowd, slow and steady. The tension? You could cut it with a knife. Daniel's smirk wobbled, then collapsed, his face paling as the penny dropped. The others swapped nervous looks, whispers, wide eyes, the works. "Good morning," Richard boomed, his voice rock solid. "My name is Richard Nelson. As of today, I'm your new chief of police." The silence hit like a thunderclap. Daniels turned beet red, his swagger vanishing into thin air. Richard locked eyes with him. Oh, how the mighty fall, then swept his gaze across the room. "When I rolled up this morning," he said, "I came in plain clothes because I wanted the real deal, not some polished act. And what I saw? Holy cow, it was a wake-up call." A murmur started, but he shut it down with a raised hand. "In just a few hours here, I've seen behavior that's not just unprofessional, it's flat-out disgusting." He leaned in, voice dropping low and fierce. "Let me spell it out for you, the toxic mess that's been rotting here. It ends today, right now." The room went graveyard quiet, the weight of his words sinking in like lead. Daniel squirmed, eyes glued to the floor busted. Richard's tone sharpened, slicing through the air. "Respect isn't optional, folks. It's the bedrock of this job. Without it, we're nothing, not to each other, not to the people out there counting on us." He paused, letting it hit home, watching them fidget under the heat of his stare. "This morning," he roared, "some of you laughed at what you thought was just some nobody getting put down. But let me ask you this, doesn't every single person who walks through those doors deserve a shred of decency, badge or no badge?" The words landed like a slap and nobody dared move. Richard held the silence, his eyes burning into them, Daniel sweating bullets now, the rest shifting like kids caught red-handed. He wasn't letting up, not yet, not ever. "Let me make one thing crystal clear. The culture that's been festering here like a rotting wound. It ends today, right now." Richard Nelson's voice thundered through the briefing room. And oh, how the air turned heavy. The place went dead silent, every officer frozen, the weight of his words crashing down like a tidal wave. Daniels, that smug jerk from earlier, squirmed in his spot, his eyes darting to the floor. Could he feel the heat? Richard edged closer to the podium's brink, his tone sharp as a razor but cool as ice. Respect isn't some optional perk, folks. It's the bedrock, the very soul of what we do as law enforcement. Without it, we're toast. We fail each other. And worse, we fail the community counting on us. He let that silence stretch out, agonizing, thick, watching those officers twitch and fidget under his unrelenting stare. Were they getting it yet this morning? Can you believe it? Some of you actually laughed, cackled like hyenas, at what you thought was just some powerless nobody getting shoved down. Richard's words sliced through the room, sharp and unforgiving. But let me hit you with this. Every single person who steps through those doors deserves respect, badge or no badge. Who are we if we forget that? His voice was a blade now, cutting deep, and not a soul dared to budge. He let the quiet linger, heavy and suffocating, his gaze locked on them, unshakable, piercing. The tension? You could choke on it. Every officer felt it, the gravity of what he was laying down. Daniels shifted again. Oh, poor Daniels, sweat beading on his forehead, his discomfort screaming loud and clear. But Richard? He wasn't even close to done. I get it, change is tough, right? It's a beast, he said, his voice steady but crackling with authority, like a storm rolling in. But hear me loud and clear. There's zero room, none, for behavior that stomps on anyone's dignity, whether it's a fellow officer, a civilian on the street, or anyone else breathing air. He stepped off that podium, slow and deliberate, each step a statement, and started walking toward them. His presence, towering, commanding. Yet his tone held this fierce, controlled fire that made your spine tingle. Officer Daniels, he barked, stopping just a few feet from the guy. Daniels flinched, jumped like a scared kid, his earlier swagger melting away like ice in a microwave. You, Richard snapped, locking eyes with him, his stare drilling holes. You're the poster child for everything broken in this dump. When you spat in my face, spat right at me, it wasn't just me you spit on. Oh no. It was the badge, the oath we all took, and the community we swore to shield. Daniel stammered, his voice a shaky mess. Chief, I didn't know. That's the whole damn problem. Richard cut him off, sharp as a whip. You didn't care to know. You didn't even pause to think, why would you? Because you figured that guy in front of you was nothing. And that lazy, rotten assumption, that's why this department's lost every ounce of trust from the people we're supposed to serve. Was Daniel sinking into the floor yet? He looked like he wanted to. The room stayed hushed, eerie, still like a graveyard at midnight. Every officer was a statue, pinned in place by the sheer force of Richard's words. He swung his attention to the rest of them, his eyes blazing. What I saw today wasn't just one idiot screw-up. Oh no, it was a whole culture, a nasty, twisted culture where bullying and prejudice don't just slip by, they're cheered on. And that stops now today. He strode back to the podium, his voice kicking up a notch, ringing out like a battle cry. I've spent my whole career, years, decades, fighting for justice, not just out there on the streets, but right here, inside walls like these. Change isn't a walk in the park, and it sure as hell won't happen overnight, but mark my words, as long as I'm chief, this precinct's running on integrity, respect, and accountability, no exceptions. Richard paused, letting that sink in deep. Could they feel the shift? Then gave a quick nod to Captain Harris, his jaw tight. Effective immediately, bam. Officer Daniels is suspended, pending a full investigation. And if any of you think this is just a little tap on the wrist, wake up. This is the first domino falling. Plenty more changes are coming. Gasps, actual gasps, rippled through the room like a shockwave. Daniel's face flared crimson, his jaw clenching so hard you'd think it'd snap, dodging every stare boring into him. Richard, cool as ever, standing tall like a mountain. This isn't about punishment. Oh no, he said, firm and fierce. It's about planting a flag, a standard. If you can't step up to it, then pack your bags. This isn't your sandbox anymore. He swept his gaze across them one last time, locking eyes with every single officer did they dare meet his look. If you're ready to do better to be better, then we're in this together. But don't kid yourselves. I'll hold you accountable every damn step of the way. The meeting crashed to an end in a thick, heavy silence, no chatter, no jokes, just the shuffle of boots as they filed out. Richard lingered at the podium, watching Daniels storm off, his face a twisted mess of shame and fury. Good riddance. The others? They wouldn't even glance up, their faces flickering between guilt and something quieter, deeper, thoughtful, maybe. Back in his office, Richard sank into his chair, letting out a long, ragged breath. Woo! He knew this was just the opening act. Years of crusty, stubborn attitudes weren't going to vanish in a snap, and some of these folks, they might never budge. But he didn't haul himself to Blue Ridge to win a popularity contest. Heck no. He came to shake things up, to make a real dent. The phone jangled, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Captain Harris, his voice shaky, unsure. Chief, I gotta say, you handled that like a pro, better than most could have. Richard leaned back, a faint grin tugging at his lips. Thanks, Captain, but the real grind starts now. I need Daniel's whole file on my desk by tomorrow, every complaint, every incident, the works. Harris hesitated, then added, You've got it, Chief. And I think you rattled some cages today in a good way. Really? Richard hoped so. He hung up, savoring that tiny spark of triumph before diving headfirst into the towering stack of paperwork. The glamour of leadership. Over the next few weeks, the precinct morphed slowly, sure, but noticeably. Officers who used to yuck it up at Daniel's cheap stunts now gave him the cold shoulder. Whispers about his suspension slinking through the halls like wildfire. Richard made it his mission to roam those corridors daily, nodding, greeting everyone, his steady presence a quiet, constant drumbeat of change. Some really got it. Officer Reyes, this young spark of a recruit, cornered him one day, her voice trembling but earnest. Chief, I've been part of that mess kept quiet out of fear. I want to do better. Richard's heart softened just a touch. That's all I'm asking, Reyes. It starts with you right here, right now. But not everyone was on board. Surprise. Daniels? He threw a tantrum, filing an appeal, whining about unfair treatment. Boo-hoo. Richard didn't flinch, standing like a rock, dead set that accountability wasn't up for debate. The review they dug up? A laundry list of dirt on Daniel's excessive force, snide remarks, the works. His appeal crashed and burned, and Richard drove it home. No more sweeping garbage under the rug. Those days were toast. Progress crept in, but man, the road ahead loomed long and rough. Talks about bias and community ties. Some officers rolled their eyes, others leaned in, mixed bag all the way. But Richard? Undaunted. Every tiny win, a recruit finding their voice. An officer pausing to rethink lit a fire in him, pushing him towards something bigger, brighter. One crisp morning, he hit up a community event, kids running wild, folks chatting, and this shy little boy shuffled up, eyes wide as saucers. Are you really the chief? He whispered, like it was a secret. Richard grinned, couldn't help it. Sure am, kid. The boy's voice dropped lower, barely audible. My dad says the police don't care about us. Ouch, that stung. Richard crouched down, meeting those big, curious eyes. I can't fix what's behind us. Chalk up another win for Richard. Every little step was gold. I can't erase yesterday, he said softly, but I swear we're trying to do better. If you ever need me, you find me, okay? The kid nodded, a shy smile breaking through talk about a heart melter. Moments like that, they were why Richard signed up for this gig. By year's end, the precinct wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was night and day different. The holdouts who couldn't hack it? Gone. New blood, folks who bought into Richard's dream of fair and square, filled the ranks. The community, wary at first, started spotting glimmers of change, a slow thaw in the frost. One evening, Richard stood in the main hall, watching officers clock out the laughter, now warm, real, not some cruel jab, Challenges? Sure, they'd keep coming. But hope? That flickered alive in him change was a beast. But damn, it was worth the fight. Oh, how this story lights a fire in me. Richard Nelson's tale isn't just about a precinct. It's a blazing wake-up call about respect, accountability, and the guts to shake up a rotten system. I'm all in for a lifestyle that demands integrity, where you don't just coast through life, letting garbage slide no way. It's about stepping up like Richard did with heart and grit, even when the world's against you. Who doesn't want to live in a place where people actually give a damn about each other? I sure do. Socially, this hits me hard. Respect shouldn't be a luxury. It's a necessity. I'm sick to death of seeing folks judged by their clothes, their skin, or some dumb assumption. Daniel's spitting in Richard's face? That's the ugly face of prejudice, and it's gotta stop. I believe in a world where everyone gets a fair shot, where power doesn't mean you get to bully, but to lift others up. Richard's fight for a culture shift? That's my jam. Tear down the cliques, the cruelty, and build something real. Wiry mighty, we need more folks like him leading the charge. And accountability? Oh yes! I'm passionate about owning your mess. Daniel's dodging responsibility? Pathetic. Life's too short for excuses. Face the music, grow up, and make it right. Richard's stand shows us change isn't easy, but it's worth every ounce of sweat. I'm cheering for leaders who don't just talk but act boldly, fiercely for justice. This isn't just a story, it's a challenge. Live with purpose, demand better, and never back down.